Um, I was lucky enough to be born in Germany. My dad was a sergeant in the army. I also went into the army, and so um, I used to live next door to people from Germany and people from Japan and people from Oklahoma. And so I've just been around diversity all my life. I love it. I'm excited about it. I think it holds a lot of potential for our country. In fact, what I would say is that we are now living through a transformational time when it comes to DEI. In fact, um, and when people talk about transformation, and Brian is an expert on this topic, but the only thing I do know for sure about transformation means that something changes so much that it'll never be what it was. And it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly can never be a caterpillar again. And that's what we're going through. And it's going to be rough. It will probably not be fun because we've been putting this off for so long that now it's time to deal with the realities of diversity in America. In fact, I feel very confident in saying that more lives in America will be affected by what we do or don't do with DEI than they will be by any other issue, except maybe climate change. Climate change is right there. And of course, in the short term, we have to deal with this terrible COVID disease. Um, and so, if you don't mind, anyone else here identify as baby boomer or older? You raise your hand if you do. Okay, that 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I can see 4. So if you don't mind me asking, baby boomers, how have we done as a generation on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Thumbs up, thumb in the middle, or thumbs down? Okay, we got one middle, you got one down. Anybody else? Yeah, I would say middle to down. And you know, we got bust. Um, we never really we you know, I mean, you know, there've been some great things that happen. America has, you know, the People with Disabilities Act, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. There's been all types of acknowledgement of LGBTQ, um, but we talk a lot as a generation. I don't think we did enough, and I think the younger generations, they'll tell you that if you allow them to. And not in a bad way, because in a weird way, we're all kind of stuck together. And the weird thing is that for most of our life, baby boomers have been the largest generation. Anybody know who the largest generation is now? Millennials. They passed Generation X and Generation Y, and they are now the largest generation. And so they have, and I think that they have a different attitude. They have a different attitude about diversity, and they have a different attitude about climate change. So, and I'm not afraid to say that. The other, just two other points is that this whole thing about DEI, it's not easy, but it's important. And if we had done it because it was the right thing to do, we would have done it already. So we've been kind of, you know, dipping our toe in the water and a lot of kicking and screaming. And I think now, I think people are ready to roll up their sleeves and do stuff. And in some ways, I think the you know, the whole thing about George Floyd and what happened to him has really spurred a lot of people to kind of get active. And at the end of the day, it's about being active, and it's about action. So the other thing that I think about DEI is really important is that it needs to be achievable. It needs to be something that everybody can see in their lives. And it's so funny about DEI because most of the people I talk with, I get lucky enough to go all over the country, and I met with people and blah, 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 blah. And everybody always tells me what other people should do. And so I actually think that what we really have to start getting to is what can we do? What can you do in your circles of influence as people? Okay, so the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is really, it's what I call who's in the room where it happens, right? We all saw Hamilton, right? The room where it happens. And we have all types of diversity, not just race. we end up talking about race a lot, but we have all types of diversity. Um, and um, and I think that it's here. It's always been here, but we've done a very poor job of incorporating it. And so there's certainly gender issues, there's LGBTQ issues, there's issues in thought, there's issues there's veterans who want to be at, like, everybody wants to be at the table and have a voice. And so um, it's you can look around whenever I go somewhere. I just look and see what I can visibly see, and there's lots of diversity that we can't see visibly. So you always have to ask and never take things for granted. But it's a big part of what I do. Now, what's interesting is equity is a very interesting word, and I didn't tell you this, but I come from a family that my birth family has, well, unfortunately, we had two sets of twins. I used to have a twin brother, he passed away, and my youngest brother had a twin sister, and she passed away. And the weird thing about twins, did we have any other twins here? Anybody? Anybody have twins in your family? Because twins know all about fairness, right? I mean, they can tell you when they live for fairness, let me tell you. And what's so weird is that most of my life we've always strove for equality. What's the difference between equality and equity? Anybody know? Oh, come on.
Well, you know, with at the risk of knowing that we've had these conversations, equality is where everything is equal. Equity is where it's fair.
Yes. So if I had a deck of 52 cards and there were 52 people in the room, you said, Charles, I want you to distribute these cards in an equal way, I would give everybody one card, right? Sure. Y'all take your card, leave me alone, right? Equity is different. Equity is actually not fair because you're not treating everybody the same. So we all have this kind of value that we treat everybody the same. And what we have to help people understand is that there's a new term that's come out since the whole COVID thing, and it makes my life so much easier. It's called pre-existing conditions. So much of my life has been arguing people that we have pre-existing conditions, and I don't think that we have to argue about that anymore. Not everyone's treated the same. And in equity, if I had 52 cards and they said distribute it, not only would I give some people 5 and give, some people, 10 or whatever, you give people what they need, but I might even take some from some of you because you don't need any, you know? And so equity is by its nature unfair. And part of our job is to help people understand that sometimes you have to do short-term unfairness to equal things out. And so that's a really big part of this agenda. And as you all go forward in your workplaces and in your personal lives and in your communities, you should always have these conversations about equality and equity, because sometimes it is the best thing. It just depends on the circumstances, but you all need to have that deep conversation. And then inclusion, and it's so funny because we never get to inclusion. Inclusion is the forgotten issue. And actually, I think inclusion, as of now, is the most important issue, because inclusion means that people now start having the ability, they're in the room. There's a lot of people who are in the room where it happens, but they don't have a voice. And sometimes they don't have a voice because they don't feel safe. They might be the only or this, that, or the other. And so inclusion is who gets to sit at the table where the decisions are made. And Barack Obama made a point, and he said that for those people who are interested in social justice, he says, don't be happy just being in the room anymore. He goes, your job should be to try to run the meeting, because that's where the power is. And at the end of the day, it comes down to power. And there's a lot of research out and a lot of documents and a lot of places that talk about this. And people want the power to be able to, address their own fate. And so those are the 3 words of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that inclusion is the most difficult one, because we have to learn how to share power. And at the end of the day, we're all, in that web of mutuality. in that travesty of we're all kind of combined. That's where we're at. But we have to succeed in diversity in spite of ourselves, because there's people who they have worldviews that are not open to this concept, and they have that right, and I believe in rights, but at the end of the day, we have to work together, and so to me, that's underlying all of this. Um, One of the things that's happened since George Floyd is this whole thing about racial justice. Now, let me just say something first, if you don't mind, and that is that I identify as a heterosexual African American male, born black and black, going to die black, love being black. If I could come back again and live again, I would be black again if I could. And so, but I also, I think, I hope everybody loves who they are, and so I think it's really important. I never apologize for who I am. I never attack people for who they are. And at the end of the day, I think that all of this is about behavior. Now, I don't care whether people have prejudices or isms. But what I do care is when they use those and they they exert those on other people. You all remember Donald Sterling, the guy who ran the Clippers, the I can't remember what city, um,
LA.
LA Clippers. But he was a person who was in real estate, and he had a lot of people who came to him for housing. And not only was he a bigot and a racist, but he had the power to insert that bigotry and racism on other people. And I remember when I heard what he said, and it was just disgusting, and it hurt me in my soul. And because he actually said it, out loud in multiple occasions. And so, unfortunately, there are people like that. And so those of us who are committed to this work, we have to learn how to deal with people like that. But the thing about racial justice, because of post George Floyd, there's two issues that have kind of come to the forefront. One is racial justice, and the other one is police reform. But there's a whole bunch of types of justice that need to be addressed as well. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I do not think that me as a black man, I don't think that we are the most discriminated people in society. I actually think people with disabilities are, especially people who have hidden disabilities that aren't even acknowledged yet. And so at the end of the day, I think we have to work together. But the one thing I want to say about racial justice is that I just think that we're at that point now where you can't talk about racial justice without talking about white supremacy. And there's this weird kind of new thing that's going on, because I work in a college. I've worked in colleges most of my life, and there's a lot of issues going on within races now. And so the Asians, for instance, there's the traditional Asian groups that we've had of the Japanese, the Chinese, and Koreans. And in a lot of cases, they don't want to be aligned with the Southeast Asians or people from India and stuff like that. And on my campus, we have this influx of Black people from Ethiopia and Somalia, and they don't really want to be associated with the people that the people that I grew up with. And so there are all these little infighting things that are going on within races and within ethnicities. And we have a lot of tribes here in Washington State. And I know when I was in Oregon, they have 10 recognized tribes, and 7 of them won't work with the other 3. And there's all these issues, and it's okay. It is what it is. But I just think that we have to. One of the big problems that we have is we put everybody in the same bucket. And even within my family, unfortunately, there used to be 8 of us. We just lost somebody this past week, and now we're down to 3. But if my 2 brothers who are still living were here on this call, they would see the world. They see the world fundamentally different than I do, and we're pretty much the same, demographic. And so there's all this diversity within diversity, and we just have to remind people about that. Okay, so I know that you all deal with housing issues, and I just have 2 or 3 quick things to say. Number one, hopefully you all know that housing is one of the key factors for economic development. And my parents uh, uh, were, they were able to buy their house. They both actually died in their house 20 years apart, within like 5 feet from each other in the main room. And they were able to use what they had to pass on some of their wealth to their children. And so housing, and you're going to see a lot of work is going to go into the housing of helping people to get home ownership. It's okay, renting is okay, but if we can get people into home ownership, that will be go a long way towards generational wealth creation. And I think you all, hopefully you all know that America has some serious problems with housing discrimination. And maybe sometime in the future, you could have a class or something, a workshop on redlining and the legacy of that. In Oregon, when I lived there for about 7 years. They actually have in their charters, when you do your home, they have charters. They actually have the language from the 1800s where you're not allowed. It says in it that you're not allowed to sell your house to, and they list some of the people that you're not allowed to sell your house to. They still had that when I was there, even up until 2010. So, and then does anybody here know what a sundown town is? Any of you know what sundown town? Can you share that with everybody what they are? Somebody want to go? Tanya, I saw you raise your hand.
Yes, where certain folks are not allowed in towns after sundown.
Yes. And so there's a guy named James Lowen, and he wrote a book on sundown towns. He also wrote the book Lies My Teacher Told Me. And he found thousands of sundown towns around America where if you were a person of color, you had to be out of the town by the time the sun went down, or you would be in big trouble. And we have several towns like that in the here. They're all over the country, but we have lots of them here in the Pacific Northwest. So you should all know that, and maybe do some workshop on that issue as well. Okay. I'll just say about moving forward. So, it's so funny because George Floyd asking me about diversity, equity, inclusion, and they basically want me to know that they're a good person and that they want to get involved. And so I finally figured out what to ask them back when they tell me that. So the first one is I have 4 questions for people who want to get more active in this issue. The first one is why do you want to do this? And the second part of that is why didn't you do this before? Like what was it that happened that made you want to do it now? I think that's important. The other thing is I ask them what is their true north? Like what guides you when you make your decisions? If you're going to do diversity, equity work, I need to know what guides you. So I had a really powerful talk with my youngest brother about 2 weeks ago, and he told me he actually marched with here in Seattle. We've been real popular for all that strange stuff that's been happening here with protests and all of that. But my brother went on a protest march, and he does it all the time. I'm not really a marcher like he is, but he was telling me that after George Floyd that he felt like energized when he went on this one particular march, and he saw people from all walks of life, and it really gave him hope and a renewed sense of hope. But then he said that what happened in the Capitol kind of took all that hope away for a while. He says, I still have it, but he said there was something about what happened in the whole Capitol thing that touched him in his soul, even more so than what happened in the march that he was in. And he wasn't able to articulate it, but I thought that was a very strong statement. And one of the things that we have to do if we want to be able to do diversity work, we have to be able to talk about like real issues that are taking place without them being political. I'm not being political when I talk about that. I'm just saying that people react to it differently. And I can tell you that just about every Black person that I know, when the Capitol riot happened, they all said the same thing. Anybody want to guess what they said? Anybody? You
If they
know,
were black, they would have mowed them down.
they would have,
it would have been a massacre.
they would have mowed them down.
Yep.
There've been two absolute things that have happened to me as a black male. The first one is when Barack Obama announced that he was going to run. For those of you who identify as African American, what's the first thing that people in the African American community said?
They're going to kill him.
He's going to get assassinated. I don't have to know you, but I know that was going all over, reverberated all over our communities. And then the second one was the double standard. And then Brian and I were talking about it, and we were trying to figure out what the word was that was inside of all of us. And Brian came up with the word that Obama used in his book, audacity. The audacity of people to know that they could do what they did and they weren't going to be challenged. And then there's a group of people that if they had done that, you know, they would have been killed. And as you know, there was a protest march that took place, you know, 6 months earlier. And what is it, over 1,000 people got arrested for the Black Lives Matter one. And then here they were taking selfies, you know. So there's these double standards that are, you know, but what my point is that we have to be able to talk about these things. Okay. And so so the second, you know, question is, what is your true north in this work? And my brother's true north is actually his son. He's got the most amazing 9-year-old son. And he said, you know, I just want to make sure that the world that he's in is, you know, deals with this stuff better than the world that I'm in. And my brother is 54 years old now. The third thing I'll ask people is, you know, what foundational work have you done already? Because I'm not here to, you know, do your work for you. So I need to know what work you did for yourself. And people don't really like that, but that's what they need to hear. And but the most important question of all of this is that I ask people, how are you going to get along with people who fundamentally see the world differently than you do? Because that's really the question. You know, when you do a dissertation, it's all about how you frame the question. And there is no question more important than that. People see the world different than I do. People see the world different than you do. And at the end of the day, how are you going to work with people who have a different perspective? And that's not an easy answer to come up with, but I think over time we all ought to be able to have an answer for that. So the final two things is, number one, I think if people really want to do this work, you have to just understand that it's not going to happen on its own. It's going to happen because we make it happen. And it's probably going to take 5% of your time. And I know you all are busy and you probably don't want to give up 5%, but it's going to take 5% of your time that needs to be devoted to DEI, social justice. And then the other thing is to get people started. If you were to be my Facebook friend, and you all can find me on Facebook, I'd love to have you as my friends. But if you were to see my Facebook account, I have diversity. I got people from all walks of life, all ages. And it's been a lifelong of doing that, of staying in touch and going places where I'm the one or the only. And I realize that it's not easy for people. You know, it's not easy for some people. And so, you know, last time I looked, most people eat 3 meals a day. Okay. Some people eat more than 3 meals a day. And last time I looked, we have, you know, 365, you know, days and blah, blah, blah. So I know, I'm not a mathematician, but I know that's over 1,000 meals a year, right? So what I ask people to do is, can you spend 1 meal a month with a new person or someone that you know, but you don't really know them well? Can you have a meal with somebody with a different demographic than you? So whatever your demographic is, I don't want you to always, you know, eat with people that look like you and think like you, but have a meal once a month with someone who's from a different demographic. And during that meal, talk about, you know, your backgrounds and your worldviews and how you see the world. And I think that I do this all the time. So I actually take people out to lunch. I have what I call my PAHA lunch fund of my money, where I take someone out to lunch. Everybody likes a free lunch, let me tell you. But we talk about these things, and it's just so empowering. And then if you did that for the rest of your life, you know, 5-10 years from now, you'd have a lot of more diversity in your inner circles. So I think that is what I'm going to end with. And I just want to know if anyone has any thoughts, ideas, or questions.
Well, first thing is I'm glad that you keep the one meal a week thing going.
A month, a month.
A month. Well, we used to do it a week at Syracuse, so
Yeah.
I'm glad it's I guess
Zorbas,
it was already.
varsity. Yeah.
But no, I just want to say thank you. My first question, and I just got to ask this: when you were talking about equity and equality, the issue is that you run the risk of being accused of being a socialist, a far liberal. How dare you distribute for equity? And so I'm just curious, how do you frame that conversation based on your experience?
Well, if I were to, if I were to have planted a question, that would have been one of the questions I planted. So thank you for asking that. First of all, I just want to say that this whole idea about socialism to me is very strange because, as I told you, I was in the military, my dad was in the military, and you don't get more socialistic than that. Okay, so it is a system that we actually have operating within our capitalism that people never think about. But what was so great is that in that that you always have housing and you always have food. Okay, so the military takes care of their people. And what I would say is that we have all types of socialism in America. We have corporate socialism. And actually, one of the most interesting things that's going on right now in our country is how are we going to stimulate the economy? So there's some people who believe that you start at the top and you give it to the big corporate businesses, and then it trickles down to the bottom and gets to the people. And then there's other people who say, well, that don't work because it never trickled down into my community. And so now this new administration is trying to stimulate it by giving money from people from all walks of life. And they want it to bubble up and they want to have a certain minimum wage. And so, Brian, I do think that those are political issues. And I think the thing that bothers me is that we don't have the ability to talk across them. But if you were to give me a magic wand, I do think that there are 3 or 4 things that should be socialistic. I think that we should definitely have socialized medicine where everybody gets the same type of healthcare. I also think that transportation needs to be socialized in our country. I think that education needs to be socialized, and I think that daycare. And I think that within those, if you had those 4 things and we put money into those and made those part of our infrastructure, I would feel comfortable if my tax dollars went to that. If we quit going all these damn wars that we're in, I think that that's a better investment. And then I think everyone else, within that, I think people, if we had those 4 things, those 4 pillars, I would feel happy if my money went to that. That's just me. But there are people, as I said, who fundamentally think that no, I don't want you giving my tax dollars away to these people. And one of the issues where that comes up with is immigration. And so there's reports now of all these new immigrants who are trying to get in that weren't trying to get in the last 4 years. And I just think that our country needs to learn how to have these difficult conversations around that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Terrell.
Not only question, but just thoughts or ideas about like what DEI looks like in your life.
How do you address the question that diversity and equality is not just about the color of your skin, but about the social economics of it, and how do we work in that system as well? Because we often talk about the color, but we never talk about the inequality in the economy.
Yeah, and I think that's now changed because of the George Floyd situation, where now that is a pre-existing condition, and I think it's on par. My personal opinion. So does everybody know that in 2043, whites will no longer be the majority in America? So that's coming right around the corner, and so a lot of what's going on in our country is about that. But I think that the bigger issue is economic inequality. And so I used to live in the projects of Philly. Anybody has ever been to Passaic, Philly? I used to live in those projects on Gary Street. And I went back about, when I was at Syracuse with you, Brian, me and my brother went back and looked at it, and they still are the same. And so my personal opinion, and I'm not trying to be political here, but I think that there's this book that came out called Class Matters. Did anybody remember that? The New York Times did this series called Class Matters. It's online and it's free. They did these 10 stories over 10 weeks of all these different people from different backgrounds. And in it, one of the things that they found out, which was very interesting, is they found out that a lot of white people, they felt that although they're not rich, they felt that they could be rich. That was part of their belief system. And so came to social justice and all of this sort of stuff. There's a lot of poor white people that actually have more in common with me as a person who grew up as a poor Black person, but their race part of the way they see the world is so strong that they wouldn't work with me. And that's really profound, because I actually, and for those of you who listen to my podcast, I think I said that right now it's about race and police reform, but the issue that's going to change our country is going to be class reform. And when everybody realizes that they're so, the rich are much richer than we think, and the poor are much poorer than we think. And unfortunately, more people are closer to poverty and poorness than we realize here. And it's not hidden anymore now, right? It's not hidden. And I think what you all do as a living has the power to transform that. And so I hope, my personal opinion, if you gave me a magic wand and said, what's the one thing I would do? I would do a massive education program and a worker retraining program. And I would take care of all those people who lost the jobs that aren't going to come back, and train people for the new economies that are taking place across our country. Thank you, Regina. Anybody else? Thought, question, or idea?
Yeah. Hi, Terrell. I'm sorry I missed the first part of your talk, so I don't know if I'll repeat anything. But let me ease into this by first saying I'll take you up on one of those free lunches.
Okay.
When all this stuff passes.
Okay. All right.
Sounds like we're on different ends of the country, but we'll figure it out. For a free lunch, I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I think Regina's question speaks to the difference between equality and equity.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, equality is just an innocent, harmless word to make people feel better. But equity is what it's really about. Interestingly, I think the word equality is plastered among the original documents of the country as a way of making the framers and the authors seem fair and just. But then as the centuries rolled on, as we've seen, it's really more about equity and taking a valuable place, in the greater society. So now I'm glad to see that word is more being thrown around today than equality. To me, equality reeks of the term separate but equal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how equitable is that? So now that we've coined this acronym DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm glad that's the middle word rather than equality. So it tells me maybe we're making a little progress toward how we're thinking about this, but still as you outlined very well, a lot of hard work still remains to be done, has to be done. But I feel like we're developing a game plan now, maybe a little more seriously than I've ever seen in my baby booming years.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because my boss is also a baby boomer. And like I said, we work with scientists, and for a lot of scientists, DEI is not their priority where I work. And I said, right after George Floyd, I said, her name is Lisa. I said, Lisa, we were able to get diversity on every department's list, DEI on every list. I said, but once the quarter starts, it slides down the list. I said, guess what? I said, it's not going to slide down the list anymore. We are now at the point where, especially students, they are agitated and they want action. and they are demanding it. And I made my name as a student activist. Brian and I were student activists at Syracuse, and me as an undergrad. And so I do think that we're on the other side of it now, and it's all about action now. Anybody else have a thought or idea or question?
I have one, Terrell.
Hi, Jay.
Hi. I really appreciated your the questions that you like to ask people about what is your true north.
Yeah.
Because that serves as the basis for us moving forward to be to treat other people fairly. I like to think of that question. I was thinking about it. Rather than asking what is my true north, I think a good question is what is true north? And I think once people find what true north is, then some of the problems can begin to be remedied. Just my thought.
Yeah, I agree, and it's so interesting how like what could be a true north. I mean, some people they're driven by making money. Like I don't really care what it is. I just care that people know what it is, because once I know that, then I it makes me feel safe with someone when I know what their motivations are. And I was really interested when my brother said that for him, the reason that he wants to do more of this work is for his son, his only child. I'm going to put those 4 thoughts in the chat for all of you.
I'd offer a comment. And thank you, Dr. Ross, for your comments. And incidentally, I was born in Germany as well. My father was in the Army.
Okay.
I'm 52, so I'm not quite a baby boomer, I guess. But yeah, no, I guess I'm a Army brat, so to speak. But we didn't live very long in Germany. We actually moved about a year after my birth, back to Cleveland, Ohio, when my father grew up. I won't delve into this too much because you kind of addressed it. I was going to actually ask a question about your thoughts regarding education, the connectivity between education and the socioeconomic ladder by which people can climb through education. And you seem to be an example of that. You said that you grew up in public housing in Philadelphia. My father grew up in public housing in Cleveland. He was able to go to college, get an education. He went to the Army. Sounds like you have a similar kind of trajectory, at least. And I presume you don't live in public housing now. My father doesn't live in public housing. His family doesn't live in public housing. I don't live in public housing. His kids don't live in public housing. I presume that if you have a family, your family doesn't live in public housing. And so that education is not necessarily a precondition to success, but it certainly, I think, can change generationally the trajectory of families. And so I think for when we talk about equity and in particular wealth building through home ownership and other kinds of vehicles, that education and the access to information, I think, is an imperative, at least for people of color. That's kind of my on January 6th. And even before that, in November of 2020. I'm not going to talk politics, but I'm sort of talking politics, right? And the divide that was so clear in just the outcome of that election, no matter what side of the fence you're on, it made it so stark, the difference of perspective that you just talked about, Dr. Ross. And trying to address that difference in perspectives such that we can actually have shared conversations and get folks to listen, which has been really challenging, and to the point where on January 6th, it was lethal. It's really disheartening, right? And I'm not trying to be fatalistic or defeatist. I'm not, won't give up, can't give up, shall not give up. But the apparatus from the history of this country that's been built, it's really hard to tear that down right now. And so I just wanted to offer that and ask for your thoughts regarding it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And the first thing I would say is I think that we ought to be able to talk about these things. Like to me, it's the issues that we can't talk about, like if are right. So for those of us who want to see change, we're going to have to figure out a way to be able to talk about those things without it being political. What I would say is that, and so, you know, it's very interesting how what happened got framed, how it's been framed. You know, at first it was called a protest march, but now there are a lot of people are saying actually it was an insurrection, and the people that did it were terrorists. Now that's, you know, like regardless of where people are politically, what we have to fight for is a common understanding of what happened. And if there's a range, that's fine. But how do you pronounce your first name?
Sengor.
Sengor.
Yes.
But you know, what I would argue is that January 6th will go down as the day that happened. But there's something else that happened on January 6th that I think is equally important, and that is that as an African American male, and Brian will tell you this, you know, Brian knew me in the 80s. I've always said that I wanted my people, you know, to do more. And I wanted us to be proactive because there's a lot of things that happen at us and to us. And I felt that we never fought for ourselves. I felt that we didn't vote. I felt that we didn't use our dollars the way we should. I felt that we didn't help people get in and get out of college and all of that sort of stuff. And so the history that I have observed in my lifetime is that we tend not to vote, you know, in record numbers. Now, when Barack Obama ran, everybody was there, and they were there. Remember all the people wanted to be at the inauguration and this, that, and the other. Well, what is so interesting is January 6th will go down in history as the day that the Black people in Georgia outworked the white people in Georgia and won the state and actually won the Senate. And I think that a lot of time needs to be devoted to that, about how that happened, because Georgia is a historically white state in the sense of how it's voted. And so it was a game changer. And so when I think of January 6th, I think of that. In fact, we are bringing Stacey Abrams here when we can, and I think that Stacey Abrams should go around the country and talk to all the people of all backgrounds about how to mobilize people, because that's a really big, I'm teaching a class right now on climate change, and I'm teaching my students about how to mobilize and actually get stuff done. So yes, in addition to what happened with the insurrection, there was another example that I think I find hope in, has been uplifting. Brian, I didn't know we were going to take up so much of your time.
You're not taking up my time. This is their time. I'm just really enjoying the conversation and the back and forth, and I'm learning so much. So
yeah, can I ask a question then? Yeah. So just like, because you all work with housing, is that right? And do all of you have tell me a little bit about like what's going on with housing when it comes to equity, and what are some of the issues that are important?
So for me, I'm the executive director in Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. And I became the director 3 years ago. And my vision is not just to house people, but to try to empower people. So I've taken on a lot of initiatives on how do we connect to services. You know, yes, you know, we were in the mind frame, I think public housing has just been for years. We're here to provide housing. That's what we do. We make sure that you qualify for this housing. Well, I'm challenging my staff, who most have been there many, many years and have a certain mindset. And when you talk about class and diversity, you know, we run the gamut. So it's teaching the people that serve these people that we house that it's more than just housing someone, that this is a holistic type of approach that we need to take, so that when you bring that person in to do an annual recertification to make the numbers right work for HUD, also, what can we provide them in a way to uplift them, empower them? And when you talk about economic development, okay, is there any type of social services that we can offer them in Lancaster City that will benefit them? It's towards homeownership, thinking about goals, empowering them in education, skills, learning a new skill, something like that. So I've been really focused on that. Has it been easy with the staff? No, because, not everybody's open to that. So then I realized, okay, well, we have to start with the people that, are working for us. And so we've been trying to have those conversations, which, like you said, is a difficult conversation to have. But I just also want to remark on what you talked about. You're friends with a lot of different people, as am I. And when everything happened with George Floyd, I mean, that was just, it brought up so many emotions of through all the years of my life being born in 1960. And, like your brother wanting to protect his young son, I never thought in my lifetime that my grandchildren would have, now I'm afraid for what the world looks like for them coming forth. So I had all those things I was dealing with. I have brothers, I have nephews, I have a son. So when I had my white friends reaching out to me, wanting me to, will you tell me what to do? How can I can't tell you what to do. And I said to them, I need, I can get back to you, but right now I can't comfort you. I'm just barely making it myself. So when I did get back to them, one thing that I said to them is, everybody wants to know, and innocently, because these are really, they meant well. And what I said is, when a person that doesn't look like you walks into the room, please don't categorize them and put them in a box. We're all individuals. The first thing that we do when, a white person walks into the room, oh, that's John, he likes art and he, runs marathons, or that's Susan and she does X, Y. I walk into the room, the first thing they see is the color of my skin. So I said, if you can do anything, the easiest thing that you can do is that. Know that this person is an individual, that we're all not all the same, whether you're African American, Latino, what have you, that these are individual people. And so I try to tell that to my staff as well. So when you're doing that annual certification, and you bring that person in, just know that you're not just qualifying them to live in the housing, but what else can we do? And then it's up to me and to make sure that you have those resources to be able to provide that information to them. So I'm constantly out in the community seeing how we can be partners with, someone who does credit repair or first-time home ownership, because we have people who that's been their life. When you said you went back to Philadelphia, that's their life. And so they don't see any other way of life. HUD has, if you get a housing choice voucher, you could pass that on to your child.
Right.
It's the family for generations. How is that empowering anybody?
Mm-hmm.
When that's the only life you know. So I'm kind of going back and forth, but that's kind of my mantra right now, and making sure that on both sides, not just with our residents, but also with our staff, to continue to keep those things in mind of respect and class, and not judge anybody just because, even if you're the same race, not judge them because of their social economic status.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time. Does anybody have any final thought or something?
Well, just when we're, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Did you be?
No, I was just going to say that I agree 100% with what Singor was discussing about education, because education is definitely the way to improve your socioeconomic position. And that's what we can do to help our residents also. Because without it, a lot of folks don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Yes.
And so they're not going to be able to pull themselves up by the proverbial bootstraps because they have no boots.
Yeah. And what I like what Barbara had said earlier too is that she she realizes that there's a system in play and there's different pieces to the system. And I think if you really want to empower people, you have to understand the system, and then you have to help people know how the system works, like credit repair, as you were saying, Barbara, and other things. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yes, Steve, you're going to say.
Thanks, Jay.
I just, no, I was just going to point out that a lot of us make a lot of effort toward helping people achieve first-time home ownership. You know, when you ask about how, what we're doing in housing, and the word, a lot of people it's difficult often to convince people that they are ready to take that step.
Yeah.
And one of the, probably the word we throw around the most to try and do that is equity. This will give you equity.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that's an old word that we've applied to other things than we're applying it to now. But it applies, all around. So just want to throw that out that we're not just rental agents, but we're also, in some respects, real estate people, and trying to help our constituents get a better piece of the pie, so to speak.
And one of the great things that you all are going to see is that there are the funds that are going to be devoted to getting people into their first home, and there's going to be, and the other thing I always try to tell these real estate people, if you are a real estate person and you want to do well in this field, you're going to have to work with people of color. Like there's too many people of color in our country for you to. It used to be when I was younger, you didn't have to work with people of color. You didn't have to work with economically challenged people. They're not always the same. And but if people really want to be good at what they do, they need to have a diverse circle, right? Because a lot of real estate is on who you know. If you don't have diversity in your inner circle, you're not going to do as well as a person who does. And so and if that's someone's true north, their wallet, I don't have a problem with that. So if there's anything I can do to help you all or talk with you again on a specific topic or hear you all, like I think it would be great if someone in your group could give a workshop on, like what are the challenges that people face going from, being able to rent to home ownership? What are the opportunities and challenges that people are facing? That like I would like to know that. Maybe someone here could do that in the future, Brian, and you could invite me.
I'll invite you.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. With that being said, I want to respect everybody's time. Dr. Ross, my dear friend, thank you so much for taking the time, especially getting up early. I know how tough that can be on the West Coast, but no, in all seriousness, thank you so very much for taking time and bringing your expertise and sharing your thoughts with us. It truly is inspirational, and thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay. Thank you all. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ross.
Hold on. Yeah, Terrell, thanks.
Thank you.
I always
Okay.
got to call you Dr. Ross. Was it
Yeah.
what night?
Yeah, it was only when I'm introduced. After that, I'm Terrell.
Thank you. Sangar, I think you're going to
you
stay
all.
on and we're going to have a conversation. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm staying on. Correct. See
Thanks
you all.
everybody for coming today, and we'll do this again in 2 weeks. I'll send out the invite today. Take care. Hold on, it's got to come back. Hello. This is called the unstable